In this video, we're continuing with section P5 and talking about factoring. So the next factoring method that we're going to look at is factoring trinomials in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. So in the last video, we saw how to factor trinomials where we did not have a number in front of x squared. Now we're going to look at trinomials where there is a number in front of x squared. And this is the process. Step 1 is to find the product of the leading coefficient a and the constant c, or in other words, multiply them together. The leading coefficient is always in front of x squared, and c is the number by itself. Step 2 is to find two numbers that multiply to ac, the number we just found, and add to b. Step 3 is to rewrite the middle term of the trinomial using these two numbers. So step 3 is sort of like a backwards combining like terms. You're breaking up the middle term into two terms that have the coefficients that we found in step 2. And then step 4 is to factor by grouping. So we're going to start with example 5 from the textbook. Factor 8x squared minus 10x minus 3. So first we're going to identify a, b, and c. A is 8, b is negative 10, and c is negative 3. And then we're going to calculate a times c. So that's 8 times negative 3, which is negative 24. If there's a negative sign in front of c, you need to make sure that you include that. Now for step 2, we're looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 24, the AC that we just found, and add to b, which in this case is negative 10. So we can list pairs of numbers like we did before and then choose the correct pair. Pairs of numbers that multiply to 24 are 8 and 3, 6 and 4, 12 and 2, and 24 and 1. Now, they're multiplying to negative 24, which means that we need to have one positive and one negative. And this one is a little bit tricky because you want to choose 6 and 4, but that's not right because when they add to negative 10, they're really subtracting to 10 because you have one positive and one negative. And so the correct answer here would be 12 and 2. The 12 is going to be negative because negative 12 plus 2 is negative 10, and negative 12 times 2 is negative 24. So what we do with those two numbers is we go back to our original trinomial here, and we break up the middle term. So our first term stays the same, that's 8x squared. We break up the middle into two terms, putting these two numbers we just found in front of x. So negative 12x and plus 2x. The order doesn't matter. I could put plus 2x first. You would get the same answer in the end. So I'm breaking this up, and when I combine those like terms back together, I should get back to what I originally started with, which was negative 10. So negative 12x plus 2x does equal negative 10x. And then my last step is to factor by grouping. So split this into two groups, factor the GCF out of the first pair, that's 4x, and then we have 2x minus 3. Now in the second pair, there is no GCF because 2x and 3 don't have any factors in common. When that happens, what you do is you just put 2x minus 3 in parentheses, whatever it is, and then that would mean there would be plus 1 on the outside. If I distribute plus 1 into here, 1 times 2x is 2x, 1 times negative 3 is negative 3. So for my answer, I'm going to have one set of parentheses that's 2x minus 3, and the second set of parentheses is the leftovers, which is 4x plus 1. So that's my answer. So next you should try to do checkpoint problem number 5. Do this in your notes, check your answer, and when you're ready, move on with the video. The next factoring method that we're going to look at is called the difference of two squares. Now, difference means subtraction, so when we're doing these problems, they're always going to have two terms with a minus sign in between. And then difference of two squares, squares here means perfect squares. So in our problem, we're always going to have numbers that are perfect squares. And then we only have an x squared term, or whatever, it could be a different variable, squared term. We don't have any terms that just have x. And so the factoring process looks like this. We start off with two things that are squared and a subtraction sign in between. And then our factored form has two sets of parentheses. The numbers here are square roots. So if what we have in our original problems are the perfect squares, in our factored form we have the square roots. And then for variables, they're going to be squared. And then in our factored form, we just have the variable by itself. So it's a little bit easier to actually do than to explain, I think. So looking at example 7, it says to factor for a is x squared minus 4. So I'm going to set up my parentheses, two sets of parentheses. My first terms here are going to be x. So x times x is x squared. And then square root of 4 is 2. So this is going to be minus 2 and plus 2. I could write plus 2 first. Doesn't matter as long as I have one positive and one negative. And then if I check this using FOIL, what happens is that I get x squared plus 2x minus 2x, negative 2 times 2 is minus 4. So the middle two terms here should always cancel out. And then I have my x squared first term and my minus 4 last term, and that is what I originally started with. For b, we have 81x squared minus 49. So for numbers, I'm always taking square roots. So square root of 81 is 9. And since it's 81x squared, this would be 9x. 9x times 9x is 81x squared. My last term, or my second term in each set of parentheses, is going to be the square root of 49, which is 7. So we have 7 here and here. 1 is going to be positive, 1 is going to be negative, doesn't matter which. And then when I FOIL this out to check it, which again is a good habit to get into, 9x times 9x, 81x squared. Outside is going to be plus 63x. Inside is going to be minus 63x. And then last is minus 49. My middle two terms cancel, and I get what I originally started with. So next you should look at checkpoint number 7. Do these in your notes, check your answers, and then move on with the video. For example 9, the way the textbook has you do it is to use a formula for perfect squares. I would recommend just thinking of this as a regular trinomial. I think it's easier than trying to remember how a formula works. But if you think of this as a trinomial and you're looking for two numbers that multiply to 9 and add to 6, those possibilities are 3 and 3 and 9 and 1, and the pair that adds to 6 would be 3 and 3. So when I set up my parentheses, there's no number in front of x squared here, so we're going back to using the method from the previous video for this. That's going to be x plus 3 times x plus 3. Multiply to positive 9 and add to positive 6. Now, because these two sets of parentheses are exactly the same, if you enter this into MyLab Math, that's fine. It'll accept that as a correct answer. But you could also write it like this, x plus 3 squared. So just to kind of be aware of that, we've talked about that before. When you have something squared, that means it's multiplied by itself. So next you should look at checkpoint number 9. Do this in your notes, check your answer, and then move on with the rest of the video. The last problem that we're going to look at here is example 11, and this is a multiple step factoring problem. So in general, when you're looking at a factoring problem, What you want to look for first is the GCF, because taking out the GCF first can make the rest of the problem easier. So looking at these three terms, I see that the numbers can be divided by 2. So I can put a 2 on the outside, and then in terms of the variables, smallest exponent on the variable is 1. This is x to the first here, so that means I can take out x to the first, or just x. Then I use backwards distributive property to factor. So 2x times what is 2x to the third? That's x squared. 2x times what is 8x squared? I need 4 to multiply to 8, and I need x to multiply to x squared. And then 2x times what is 8x? That's just going to be a plus 4. Now, what's going to happen here is that my set of parentheses I can factor again. So the 2x is just going to stay on the outside. I need to remember that probably the easiest way to make a mistake with this is to just kind of lose that GCF. That needs to stay. And then how do I factor this? Well, this is a trinomial, so we're going to factor it into 2 sets of parentheses. We don't have a number in front of x squared, so we're just looking for 2 numbers that multiply to 4 and to add to 4. That would be 2 and 2. Both are going to be positive. So 2x times x plus 2 times x plus 2. Or I can also write that as 2x times x plus 2 squared. So next you should look at checkpoint problem number 11. Do this in your notes, check your answer, and then you're ready for the homework assignment.